Maya froze as Officer Reynolds held up the plastic bag. "What's this?" he sneered. "That's not mine," she cried, but Reynolds just smiled. "Looks like Ms. Carter's been running a little business on the side." Gasps filled the room as Maya's face burned with humiliation, but what happened next would expose the truth and shock everyone. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a cold glow over the classroom as Officer Reynolds stepped inside. The sharp click of his boots against the tile floor cut through the quiet hum of the students. Maya Carter's stomach tightened the moment his icy blue eyes locked onto her. She sat stiffly at her desk, clutching her notebook, her curly hair falling over her shoulder as she lowered her head. Reynolds wasn't someone who made friendly visits. When he showed up, it meant trouble, and Maya knew trouble had a way of sticking to people like her. "Ms. Carter," Reynolds' voice cut through the room like a whip. "Come with me." Maya's heart slammed against her ribcage. Her eyes darted to Mrs. Lee, her history teacher, whose gaze dropped to her desk. Around her, the other students froze, exchanging tense glances. The classroom seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in closer. I didn't do anything." Maya's voice trembled. Reynolds' face darkened. His expression sharpened into something cold and dangerous. "I said, come with me." Maya pushed herself up from the desk slowly, her hands trembling. Her knees wobbled beneath her as she forced herself to move toward him. Just as she reached the front of the room, Reynolds' hand shot out and gripped her arm. Hard. "Ow! You're hurting me." Maya gasped, her voice cracking. "Shut your mouth," Reynolds barked. Gasps erupted from the students. Chairs squeaked as some students leaned forward, their mouths slightly open. Mrs. Lee's face went pale, but she didn't move. She didn't say a word. Reynolds yanked Maya toward the door, his fingers digging into her arm. Her notebook slipped from her grasp, falling to the floor with a hollow thud. Then her backpack slid from her shoulder and hit the ground. The zipper burst open, and a small plastic bag tumbled out. The room fell dead silent. Reynolds' eyes sharpened as he stooped down and picked up the bag. A thin smile curled at the corner of his mouth as he held it up between two fingers. A small pouch of white powder rested inside the plastic. "What's this?" he sneered. His tone dripped with mockery. Maya's breath hitched. Her eyes widened in horror. "That's not mine!" she shouted, panic flooding her chest. Reynolds turned toward the class, his eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. "Looks like Ms. Carter's been running a little business on the side." Maya's knees buckled beneath her. Heat flushed her face as whispers erupted across the room. Laughter mixed with disbelief. Tears stung her eyes as Reynolds tugged her toward the door. Her chest tightened painfully, her breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. "You're coming with me," Reynolds growled. And Maya knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup. Maya sat handcuffed in the hard plastic chair, her wrists aching from the cold steel digging into her skin. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts as tears rolled down her cheeks. Principal Harris sat across from her, her expression cold and impassive. The gray streaks in her short hair framed a face carved from stone. Harris's thin lips pressed into a tight line as she shuffled a stack of papers on her desk, as if this was nothing more than routine. "This is a serious offense," Harris said, her tone flat and matter-of-fact. "Drugs on school property." Maya's head snapped up. "I didn't do it!" she cried, her voice raw. Her chest burned from holding back sobs. In the corner, Officer Reynolds leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. His smug expression made Maya's stomach churn. His cold blue eyes gleamed with twisted satisfaction. "We have a zero-tolerance policy," Reynolds said smoothly, his tone dripping with false authority. "And if I had to guess, This isn't the first time. Maya's fists clenched in her lap. Hatred boiled in her chest, her pulse hammering in her ears. He was lying. She knew it. He planted that bag. But why? What had she done to deserve this? Or maybe it wasn't about her at all. Maybe it was about what she represented. The door to the office flew open with a sharp bang. Jasmine Carter stormed into the room, her heels striking the floor with fierce precision. She was a force of nature, tall, dark-skinned, and commanding. Her sharp brown eyes zeroed in on Maya's cuffed wrists, and her expression darkened. "Uncuff my daughter. Now." Jasmine's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Ma'am," Reynolds started, standing up straighter. Jasmine's eyes sharpened. "I said, now!" Principal Harris hesitated, glancing nervously at Reynolds. He shifted on his feet, but Jasmine's glare pinned them both in place. A tense silence filled the room. "No!" Jasmine's voice rose, vibrating with fury. Harris's hand trembled as she produced a key from her desk drawer. The cuffs clicked open, and Maya's wrists throbbed as the steel slid away. Maya slumped forward, gasping, and collapsed into her mother's arms. Jasmine wrapped her arms around Maya's shaking body and pressed a hand to the back of her head. Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. "Mom, I swear I didn't." "I know, baby, I know." Jasmine's voice was low, fierce. Her eyes sharpened as they lifted toward Reynolds. "You planted that bag." Reynolds' smile faltered for the first time. His eyes narrowed. "Careful with those accusations, ma'am." Jasmine's gaze sharpened into a glare. "You think I don't know how this works? You think because she's a black girl, you can frame her and no one will believe her?" Reynolds' jaw twitched. His posture stiffened, his smile twisting into something harder. "Watch yourself," he said. Jasmine took a step toward him. "Or what?" Her voice was low, dangerous. "What are you going to do? Arrest me too?" Reynolds' eyes darkened, but he said nothing. Jasmine turned to Harris. "You have cameras in the hallway, right?" Principal Harris's face paled. Her hands fumbled with the papers on her desk. "Then pull the footage," Jasmine said. Her voice was sharp, unyielding. Reynolds' expression darkened, his shoulders stiffening. For the first time, uncertainty flashed in his eyes. Jasmine didn't move, her eyes burning into his with cold fury. The room pulsed with tension so thick it was suffocating. "Go ahead," Jasmine said, her tone cutting through the silence like a blade. "Let's see what really 30 minutes later." They were watching the security footage in the office. The footage showed Reynolds walking into the hallway alone. He slipped his hand into his jacket and pulled out the plastic bag. He opened Maya's backpack while she was still in class, slid the bag inside, and zipped it shut. Maya's hands shook with rage. "You son of a—" Jasmine growled. Reynolds' face paled. This is taken out of context." "Out of context?" Jasmine shouted. "You planted drugs on a black girl, a minor, and humiliated her in front of the entire class." Reynolds' mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "You racist piece of garbage," Jasmine seethed. Principal Harris's face went white. "Officer Reynolds, I'm going to have to ask you to—" "No," Jasmine said. "You're not just going to ask him to leave. You're going to fire him." Reynolds shook his head. "You can't—" Jasmine pulled out her phone. "I have a lawyer on speed dial, and I guarantee you, this will go viral by tomorrow morning." Reynolds' face twisted in panic. "You don't want this smoke," Jasmine said coldly. The next morning, Reynolds was escorted off the school premises in handcuffs. Charges of corruption and racial profiling were already making headlines. Maya sat with her mother on the front steps of their house, wrapped in a blanket. Jasmine handed her a mug of hot chocolate. "You okay?" Jasmine asked softly. Maya nodded. I don't understand why he would do that to me. Jasmine kissed her daughter's forehead. Because people like him think they can get away with it, but not this time. The school issued a formal apology. Reynolds was charged with falsifying evidence and misconduct. Maya was no longer the girl who had been humiliated. She was the girl who fought back. At school, students whispered in awe. Some apologized for doubting her. Others just watched, amazed. In history class, Mrs. Lee smiled at Maya. I'm sorry for not standing up for you. Maya smiled. It's okay. A week later, Maya found herself walking down the hall when a younger girl stopped her. Hey, the girl said shyly. I saw what happened. I wanted to say you're really brave. Maya smiled. Thanks. Justice had been served, and this time it stuck.